Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to all members and all members of the public. Our Planning Committee meeting here now this afternoon at 2 o'clock on the 4th of October. Before we commence, could you please make sure that all mobile phones are switched off? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Everybody okay with that? Right. Apologies for absence, please.
Just one apology, Chair, Councillor Webb.
Right, thank you. Before we commence with the agenda, we'll do all the introductions first, so that as we've got quite a few members in the public, a gallery up there, so they would like to know what the procedures are. So I'll start as I am County Councillor Ruth Edwards, Chair of the committee, and my ward is Antilio Cresceni. And to my right,
County Councillor Peter Clark, Member for Llangibby Vower.
Robert Tranter, I'm the legal advisor to the Planning Committee.
Mark Hand, Head of Planning, Housing and Place Shaping.
Paula Clark, Planning Applications and Enforcement Manager.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Craig O'Connor, Senior Development Management Officer.
thank you all. Thank you very much indeed. Declarations of interest now from members, please. None whatsoever. Gosh, that makes a change. Thank you. Now we go on to confirm the accuracy of the last committee meeting. Right, on page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6, page 7, and page 8. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Higginson? Could I have a show of hands for approval, please? Thank you all very much. Now we go to the first application. It's not really in order. This is on page 29, as when we have speakers on any application, we do hopefully use the opportunity then for them to speak so they don't have to sit through the whole of the agenda. Okay, Mark? Mark will introduce this application. Thank you. And this is number DC 2015/01431. Right, thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the Hadnock Road site and is a proposal for a luxury hotel and spa facility with associated bits and pieces that I'll run through. Committee, remember, this came to the meeting in May, 3rd of May, with an officer recommending for refusal, but after a very detailed discussion, looking at the flood risk versus the significant economic benefits of the scheme, members were minded to approve it. Subject to modelling for flood risk off-site being considered and sent to NRW for their approval, and then committee was then happy for it to be approved by a delegated panel. It's back on the agenda today for full committee because although the modelling work's been done, we still have an issue being raised by NRW. So it's back to committee for a decision, but I'll run through that in a bit more detail in a minute. I'll just quickly run through the plans as a bit of a recap and then go through the update for you. So it's this site shown on the photos on Hadnock Road. This photo showing the access road outside and the existing buildings on the site and significant areas of hard standing that you'll probably recall. And that's the road, Hadnock Road, looking the other way with the site itself on your right hand side, just here. So this is a site outlined in red with some very significantly sized existing but pretty derelict employment buildings on site. And the site's allocated in the LDP as an employment site. So the policy is there to protect it for employment type uses. However, there's no officer objection to the principle of having this leisure use on the site, partly because the economic benefits resulting from it and partly because of the nature of the employment facilities there and the investment needed to bring that back into use and the limited interest from investors of going there. So with an outline application with all matters reserved except for the access and scale, which are to be considered now. And we're looking at a 60-bed hotel as a luxury spa hotel. Those buildings will be roughly 2 stories in height, 15 metres to ridge, and the floor levels at 20.15 metres AOD, which is of significance, and I'll come to that in a second. There's also proposed to be 6 2-bedroom serviced hotel apartments on the site, a 3,700 square metre spa, an energy centre, which is the little blue building towards the north of the site with the asterisk on, which would have a flue maximum 21 metres in height, and then associated landscaping and car parking. So on that plan you can see the hotel building, which is the slightly more peachy orange shade, the associated buildings and hotel apartments, which are the darker orange, the parking, which is the grey areas, and the 2 black arrows show the access points into the site. So it's on the outskirts of Monmouth town itself, but in easy walking distance of the town, and also right on some key cycle routes and footpaths. So it could be a real asset in tourism terms, linking into the town. It's a brownfield site, as I mentioned, and you've seen the photos and been there yourselves to see the buildings on site. There's a bit more of a detailed but indicative site location plan. So again, you can see the hotel and spa building towards the top of the site, the parking, and then the ancillary uses towards the southern end of the site, and some pretty extensive areas of landscaping and open space between the buildings and the river. Just off to the left-hand side, outside of the coloured area, but between that and the river, is the residential development, which are kind of park chalet type homes right on the riverbank that you'll probably be familiar with passing by. So again, these details are indicative because it's an outline application, but we do have the height parameters and the scale of the buildings. So it shows how the scheme would sort of sit under the slight gradient of the site. That's the energy centre towards the top of the site as a recap. And then this, I'm not sure how clear this will be from towards the back of the room. This is a section through the site. So the river's on the far left, leading up to Hadnock Road, which is just here. So looking through at the scale of the buildings as proposed, and you can see on there the grey outline of the existing buildings, which would be removed as part of the proposal. This plan just seeks to illustrate the extent of existing hard-standing and buildings, which is the blue area, versus the pink area. So there's around about 3,000 square metre reduction in hard surface on the site, which in itself is good news in terms of flood risk. And that last plan, sorry, just showed the access points, but you'll recall from the discussion last time there's no objections or concerns in terms of highways matters. So the sole issue that was discussed really with committee previously was a flood risk, and that compared to the significant economic benefits of the scheme. There were 3 issues in terms of flood risk. So firstly, there's an in-principle objection because it's what we call highly vulnerable development, and it's in flood risk zone C2, so undefended floodplain. But in itself, we reported to you that wasn't an issue for officers. If there were no other issues, then we wouldn't be suggesting we refuse it just on those in-principle grounds. The second issue was around the modelling, and the resolution last time was for the applicants to go away, do the modelling, submit it to NRW for their approval, and then we report it back to delegated panel for their approval. And I'll detail that in a second. And then the third and final one related to the impacts of flood risk, and the fact that there'd be no dry route of escape. But in assessing that previously, I mean, you'll have another discussion about that potentially today, but in assessing that previously, members were very mindful of the economic benefits and also the fallback use of the site. So albeit that the existing uses are employment-based and therefore in a different flood risk category, essentially you have people there driving to and from the site if the site were up and running, as could happen without planning consent. And so members weren't concerned about that aspect of it, given the other things they considered. I mentioned very briefly the floor level of the buildings as 20.15 metres AOD. That's above the 1 in 100 year flood event plus climate change. So if there were a flood, the buildings themselves are dry. During the process last time, but before committee, the car parking areas are raised too. So the car parks are also dry. So no one's car or suitcase would be bobbing down the river. But the site would effectively be an island because Hadnock Road further south would be under a fairly significant depth of water in the worst event. The road to the north would be dry, but is a dead end. In an absolute worst case scenario, you could just walk up the hill. So I don't think there's a particular risk to life and limb in that sense. But that's something we looked at last time. In terms of the update there, members, the modelling was sent off to NRW, and it was based on a reassurance from NRW that the model didn't need any changes. The company that's doing this for the applicants actually developed the model in the first place in 2008 for NRW, and that was being used to inform the whole scheme. So you'll see from the late correspondence, the applicants are expressing their disappointment and frustration that some 6 months later, or 5 months later, we haven't got much further. NRW's had a look at the modelling, but has come back a couple of times with some concerns. Those concerns have been addressed, but we've had this final letter now, which has also been circulated to you, setting out their further issues. And there's a couple of key points in that letter. The first one relates to the way in which the models looked at the height of the buildings, and they're saying that the model that's submitted incorrectly shows the buildings being on a higher ground level. There's a very easy explanation to that, which is covered in the non-technical response that we circulated to you. But that's been done deliberately by the applicants, not because they propose to build the buildings higher, but by telling the computer that they're at a higher level. The model doesn't assume that floodwater's going in the front door. There's some capacity in the building and it's coming out the back door. So they artificially show the building as being higher, which means that that complete footprint is out of bounds for any water. So really it's modelling a complete worst case scenario. So NRW's raised that, but we're perfectly happy with the explanation to that. And then the second issue, they're saying that there's been more recent modelling approach on the River Wye, which looks at the bridge slightly downstream and the way in which that potentially acts as a dam in a flood event, which they say can affect flood depths by up to 200 millimetres. The applicants are not agreeing to that approach, and they're happy with the modelling that they've done. And really, we're a bit caught between two very technical bodies arguing about something that's very technical. The parts that I do understand, I'm comfortable with. The bit about the bridge, I'm still slightly unclear on, but I think Jan will cover that when she speaks. And there's correspondence being issued to you from the applicant's flood advisor. So as it stands, we still have an objection from NRW. So it hasn't resolved the thing that members were hoping to resolve last time, but it is in that context. I just wanted to show you a couple of plans that are part of the late correspondence, but if you've got them in black and white, they won't show up very well. So this plan here is looking at the change in flood off-site as a result of this development in the 1 in 100 year event plus climate change. So they're factored in what the NRW says will happen in terms of climate change. On the left-hand side, if it's shaded in blue, then flood risk is actually getting better. And if it's shaded in red, it's getting progressively worse. The darkest red on that chart is that it's over 0.05 of a metre, so 5 centimetres. So this is showing that the footprint of the building itself, as proposed, the flood risk will be getting worse. But the areas off-site are all in blues and greens. So that's showing that it's actually, for some reason that only the model experts can explain, it's actually getting better off-site. And that's potentially largely because of the reduced amount of hard surfacing. This second plan shows the same kind of thing, but for the 1 in 1,000 year event, which is the really extreme flood event. So that is showing quite clearly there are red areas off-site, primarily on the neighbouring employment sites, but also just on the bottom is a school, and there's a residential development behind, as you can see. But we're talking in the depths of these yellows and oranges, round about 1 centimetre. The absolute maximum there is 5 centimetres anyway. But in the context of flooding depths on the road, which were in the region of 1.5 metres plus anyway. So the applicants say, and I'd agree, that it's a negligible increase. Generally speaking, anything around about 5 millimetres, no one thinks is of any significance. I think part of what the applicants are saying is, although the modelling is showing these results, and NRW is saying you need to look at the bridge as well, the impact of doing that and these results are just showing there is no negligible increase in flooding off-site. What we can't get to at the moment is an actual written response from NRW saying, yeah, we agree. So that's where we are. It's come back to committee at the request of the applicants and the delegated panel, because I think it needs a bit more wider thought and discussion. The applicants have pointed out that if committee were minded to refuse it, they would prefer another stab at going through NRW's modelling process again. But they do feel that they've done absolutely everything they can and need to do to demonstrate the flooding risks off sites are acceptable and not significantly worse, nothing more than very marginally different, and in some places even better. So the options before committee now are to grant consent along the lines of the previous resolution. In the new report, we set out what we'd recommend as conditions, and we're also recommending a Section 106 agreement for a contribution to improve the cycling and walking facilities into Monmouth Town itself. So this is something we mentioned really briefly at the last meeting, but we got sidetracked with the flooding debate. That contribution, I believe, has been agreed to by the applicants, and it's a way of linking in the economic benefits that committee was talking about to Monmouth Town itself. We'd also recommend, if members go down that route, an extra condition to what's in the report, which is to require the details of the flood management plan. So committee will remember that last time we went through in quite some detail the flood management plan draft that had been prepared, which looked at how they'd actually deal with a flood event, how it could provide an actual amenity for people stranded in the area in their homes, and how they'd have advance warning and be able to vacate the guests from the hotel. So the first option for members is to approve, subject to those conditions in the 106 agreement. The second option is to refuse, as per the officer report, or the third option, which is the applicant's preference if you're heading in the direction of refusal, is to defer to go through some further modelling. But I would mention that we have gone through 5 months of trying to get it resolved, and to the applicant's frustration, we haven't got there yet. Okay, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for all those explanations, Mark. I believe the local member wishes to speak on this application. If you'd like to take the stand, and sort of a stand, and you've got 6 minutes and then 2 minutes later on if you wish to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. It's virtually 6 months that this application has, in effect, been backwards and forwards. The technical arguments between NRW and the applicant or consultant I will leave to the Planning Committee, who have a better understanding than I possibly would do. The balance here is, as Mark Hans has said, between the flooding and the economic benefits. As ward member, the economic benefits certainly override everything. There is a great need in Monmouth for jobs, and this will bring jobs to the area. It will also bring an awful lot of other benefits to the area as far as tourism and promoting Monmouth in a way that it can only be good for the town. I asked the Planning Committee to grant consent to approve this application and in effect be able to get this to start as soon as possible so that the town can see the benefits of the economic from the hotel itself. So that will bring so much benefits to the town that I think in effect probably enough time has been spent arguing between the two, and I think in effect I would ask that it's approved.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I believe Mark still wishes to mention something else. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, 2 things I forgot to mention. The first is that if members are minded to approve the scheme, we would have to refer it to the Welsh Minister to consider whether or not she wishes to call the application in. That's because of the nature of the development and the flood risk. So the outcome of that's either that she decides to call it in and makes the decision herself, or she says it's of no more than local importance and refers it back to us, and your decision is issued. The second thing I was going to mention really briefly is we had a discussion with the chair before the meeting, and given what we felt were exceptional circumstances about the argument in this case, the chair has agreed that there could be some extra public speaking on this matter. So we've invited both the applicant and NRW to speak. NRW's declined the invitation, but the applicant still asked to take up the offer. So we have got that opportunity for a bit more of the debate to be heard. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that explanation, Mark. Yes, we did have the discussion, and when we've got something that is quite sometimes controversial or a big development, I think we have to do as much as we can to have it all openly discussed to come to as good a decision as we possibly can and explore all avenues. So yes, I have allowed the applicant to speak again today. If you would like to take the stand, please, and give your name. You have 4 minutes. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to thank the committee members. Jan Kitcher, I'm Project Development Lead for the Hotel and Spa. I'd like to thank the Planning Committee members for allowing me to speak at the meeting today and with regard to the Hotel and Spa application, which we requested to be brought forward again to the committee. The unanimous approval by the members of the application back in May was a fantastic news for us, and with their recommendation for it to be deferred to the delegated panel pending further modelling to confirm that the development would not increase flooding elsewhere. This appeared to be sensible and straightforward, and with our flood risk and modelling consultants being clear that there would be no detrimental effects elsewhere, I'm very confident that the further modelling would confirm this. The flood modelling results were sent to NRW, and 6 weeks later we received a response from them with further queries, which our consultants answered. However, when NRW responded 3 weeks later, stating a lack of confidence in our response and with further queries and requests for additional modelling that went beyond the scope sought by the committee members, we concluded that NRW were being totally unreasonable. Whilst we accept the significant role that NRW plays in providing technical advice on flooding and flood risk, they have gone beyond the clarification that the committee requested and are effectively playing both judge and jury on the issue. NRW make it clear in their correspondence that it is for the local planning authority to determine whether the application is approved, but by continuing to query our experts' flood modelling and failing to confirm that they have proved that the flooding will not be increased elsewhere, NRW leave planning officers with little or no objection but to recommend a refusal. However, if the committee members still feel that they are not able to approve the application, we would respectfully ask that they defer it again and, most importantly, clarify how the answers to any further NRW questions or requests would be assessed and judged, and that a time frame be set for this process in order to avoid even further delays, which could ultimately put the project at risk. So to conclude, the economic benefits of the hotel and spa application have been well documented throughout the extensive public consultation period and the planning process. And our flood modelling consultants have answered the committee's question and confirmed that flooding won't be increased elsewhere. The derelict site is largely redundant, has been largely redundant for the last 9 years, in significant disrepair and needs a more sustainable and positive use. The hotel and spa offers a significant regeneration opportunity for Monmouth and a compelling opportunity for Hadnock Road to move away from its industrial past. The premium independent hotel and spa would help deliver the Welsh Government's strategy for luxury hotels with spa and wellbeing facilities, and will create a unique and outstanding tourism destination for Monmouth and the county. Thank you to the Planning Committee for your unanimous approval for the hotel and application back in May, and in doing so recognise the significant economic benefits and tourism opportunity that the application represents. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed. As you are all well aware, the committee, this has been going on for a long time. I will, and most of you know the site well, I will ask now the two Monmouth County Councillors to speak first. Firstly, I'll have Councillor Bob Hayward and then Alan Wintle, as they are Monmouth Town Councils and they will have more of a knowledge of the area and impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My ward butts onto this. I'm the opposite side of the river. I agree everything that Councillor Hackett-Payne has said. The economic benefits to the town are enormous. But I think Councillor Hackett-Payne didn't mention also the aesthetic benefits that this project gives there. At the moment, there's a derelict site. It's very unsightly. And the fact of a new modern hotel built on the river can only also be an asset to the town. It's certainly not a controversial site. I haven't met anybody in the town with any objections to it. But of course, everyone's aware that the River Wye in Monmouth does flood, and what we were concerned about was the flood risk. Now, the flood risk we were concerned about was not to the hotel itself. The developer's taken that away. It was whether there's a flood risk to surrounding properties. And, okay, the NRW have come up, and there's a technical argument about modelling, about whether it's a benefit, whether it's makes it worse. And we're talking about millimetres. Now, we have already agreed as a committee that this project is well worth supporting. We should bring it forward as quickly as possible for the benefits of the town. And I think to quibble about 2 or 3 millimetres of water is just being churlish. And therefore, I'm minded to ignore NRW's not severe objections. They're arguing really about whether their model is better than the model they previously approved a few months before. And I think we shouldn't defer it. I think we should approve this at this meeting here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Wintle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with what Bob says on most, well, everything, in fact. NRW is supposed to be supporting tourism in the area, and yet for some peculiar reason they're reluctant to pass this. This site, you know, you're going to get water around it or up to it, but it's sufficiently high enough it's not going to be any trouble. I'm saying what Mark warned us about, the fact that NRW could possibly call it in for the Minister. And I think that we must have a good, robust case to put before the Minister, because I wouldn't say that NRW would try to influence the Minister, but they've done it in the past on that canoe operation when people wanted to camp during the summer and they were worried about flooding, and they got the canoes alongside them. You know, there's no common sense with the people who sit behind their computers down at Cardiff, I'm afraid. Talking to engineers from NRW, they scratch their heads quite regular, I'm afraid, with their colleagues. And you could say because they didn't come today to put their case, is an example. So I think this is good for Monmouth. It's good for tourism for the area. It's good for everything. In fact, I can't understand why we haven't had it go ahead. I support it as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wintle. Anybody else wish to comment now? Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And along with the previous two members, I looked at this and thought, well, we've got eminent consultants who have had a good look at this. They've produced a very, very thorough report, and as Mark said, they wrote the original criteria anyway. I then looked at the NRW letter and I thought, well, hang on a minute, who's right here? But listening to Mark's explanation, that's cleared up those points. I do understand that it may well be called in, but I don't think we should contribute to an even further delay. So my original thought was to go for deferment, but I'm quite happy now to support it for approval.
Councillor Mivett, Councillor Blakeburn, then Councillor Roger Harris.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement. You're sort of looking at a balance. I have pressed it, I'm on, yeah. There's economic benefits, employment, the increased footfall through tourism, and it'll make good of a redundant site. So those are all the positives. The issue is the suggestion it's a highly vulnerable development, and my question is for who? The modelling suggests that there is, there won't be any impact on homes, so that you're not going to render any families homeless. There isn't any risk to life and limb, as Mark has suggested. The only risk really would be to the developers and the owners of the hotel, I would suggest. That's their risk, their insurance. So I think on balance, I would look to approve the scheme and not delay it any further, really.
Thank you, Councillor Blakeburn. Councillor Harris, then Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think Debbie's actually just summed it up. The only likely loss, because the area is liable to flooding, we all know that, and it's liable to be to the owners of the hotel. I think with the modelling of the flooding of this river, as far as I'm aware, anyone in the area will have, I believe it's days to know that the floodwaters are coming down. So nobody is liable to be affected. Water may get into the hotel, but there won't be anyone there. If the modelling is correct, to even get wet feet. So I go along with the recommendation that we approve.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Much of what I was going to say has been said already, but the difference in the modelling between the two models is such a minute difference in levels. I don't think it is justified refusing this or setting it back yet again. I think the risks are minimal, and I think we should vote to move on with this project, which will bring such a lot of benefit to Monmouth and the county in general. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. I have noticed this is all about water, but nobody has mentioned boats at the standby or even Wellington boots. So I think we've all given it a really good airing, and I believe Councillor Hayward moved for approval. And you have a seconder in Councillor Alan Wintle. Do we have a show of hands for approval, please? Right, thank you. So nobody is against the application. Thank you, Rob. We now go to page 53, and this is application 00714 in Abergavenny.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full application for the erection of a pair of semi-detached two-storey dwellings on land to the rear of 61 Park Crescent, Abergavenny. Outline planning permission for this development was approved in May of this year. Therefore, the principle of the development has already been established. It's one that members saw on site yesterday. That's a photograph showing the access to the site. As you remember, we walked up the public footpath and access is on the corner there. But the vehicular access is coming through the parking court to the north. So if we move on to the plans, Mark, if we could. That's the site in context. That's the red site outlined there. And if we move on to the block plan, that's the pair of semi-detached dwellings there. The dwellings will be two-storey with accommodation within the roof space. The principal elevations of the new dwellings will face onto the public footpath to avoid any overlooking. The gable ends will be left blank, and the first floor windows at the rear will be obscure glazed as they serve bathrooms. This arrangement will prevent any loss of privacy to existing neighbours. By utilising the roof space, the ridge height of the dwellings will be limited to 7.2 metres, and the dwellings have been sited to allow for parking and a distance of between 6 to 8 metres to the boundary with number 59. Access is from the lane to the north, and the parking and turning areas are considered to be acceptable. So if we go to the elevations, Mark, that's the floor plan. That's the elevations. You can see at the bottom there, that's the windows overlooking the garden of number 59, which are due to be obscurely glazed because they for bathrooms. And the principal elevation at the top, that's the elevation facing the public footpath. A condition is recommended to maintain the hedge adjacent to the footpath at a height of no more than 1 metre to ensure visibility from the access. And a condition is also recommended to deal with any issues arising from contaminated land of the site. It used to be railway land. A further condition is recommended to ensure the windows on the first floor at the rear of the dwellings be retained as obscurely glazed in perpetuity. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application, subject to the conditions outlined in the report, plus the condition relating to obscure glazing, and a Section 106 agreement to secure a financial contribution towards affordable housing in the area.
Thank you, Paula. I'm not sure whose ward this is. I thought it perhaps might be James George, the adjoining member on the committee. Sorry? Oh, you have got a speaker. Sorry. I turned my page over. Sorry. Yes, Yvonne Spencer, is it? Right, if you'd like to take the stand, and you have 4 minutes, please.
Sorry, I'm going to have to read this because I'm speaking on behalf of others. Local residents ask you not to apply new build housing densities to this infill development in an existing residential area. Case officer states that there is already a precedent in the locality relevant to this application. We contend that there is not. The other application for development of 2 semi-detached dwellings in Park Crescent was never built. That permission has now expired, and anyway, it was in a different situation with no access issues and a lower density of surrounding existing housing. The cumulative effect of the proposal in this current application and the developer's previously approved application is the creation of a mini housing estate on a site where there was 1 property. Others are awaiting your decision before submitting similar applications in established areas of the town. Your decision will set a new precedent. Put yourselves in our position. The appeal of an older area is the space and character it has. Please don't spoil that. We would ask you to protect the integrity of established areas and not apply modern densities in this case. As a second issue, the case officer report mentions proposals to demolish a garage and shed. When the original property was purchased, the 2 plots were registered under separate title deeds. The garage and shed are situated within the boundary of the other plot, for which planning permission has already been given. This demolition should have been included when that application was considered. As the demolition relates to a different property, we request that it is subject to a separate application. It should be noted that if you agree to the demolition of these buildings, you will be allowing access from the south because the fence which used to divide the 2 properties has been removed. Your case officer states that the current application will be accessed from the north. However, we have concerns that construction and other traffic will access from Park Crescent if you approve this proposal. This would present a danger to both pedestrians and traffic on a busy road. The final point we would like to raise is with regard to the access. The public right-of-way between Park Crescent and Udsgaboron, which is designated as a footpath, will be crossed by vehicles using this access. People are surprised to hear it referred to as a highway. A survey I conducted indicated that 154 pedestrians but no vehicles used it between the busy period of 8 to 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, so pedestrians are not used to encountering vehicles. Whilst we welcome the proposed condition to lower the hedge along the western edge of the application site, there are restricted areas on the land to the north, for example near the electricity substation, which I believe was shown just now, which still present a danger to pedestrians. Health and safety provisions should be put in place before any movement of traffic to and from the site is allowed, given the types of vulnerable pedestrians who use this route, for example, school children, elderly people, disabled. We're all aware that the land we're talking about is owned by Monmouthshire Housing Association. Your case officer states that the applicant may have to obtain consent from MHA. We assert that they must obtain consent. Advice received from a planning inspector who works for Planning Aid Wales states, and I quote, "If MHA allow for vehicular right-of-way, it should be evidenced because the public right-of-way is on foot and not for vehicle." He also says that if MHA have objected and not granted a right for vehicles to pass, that would be a fundamental reason why any planning permission could not be implemented. We understand that Monmouthshire Housing Association have not commented on this application, but we do know their response to the outline application was that they objected, and they confirmed that they had not received an application for right of easement or been asked to consider sale of the land. There seems to be a legal discussion to be had here. Without sorting out the legalities, what would happen if a school child were to be injured by a vehicle accessing this site? Who would be responsible? The developer? He could say it's not his land. MHA? It's not their vehicle.
Excuse me, your 4 minutes is almost up.
I've got
Right,
one
thank you.
sentence left. Everybody needs to know what their responsibility and liabilities are. Because of this, we say that there is a fundamental issue that has to be answered. And it's also fundamental to whether your planning decision carries any worth. We ask for a pragmatic solution by requesting that you do not make a decision on this application until the applicant can legally prove vehicular right-of-way granted by Monmouthshire Housing Association. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Madam Chair, before you go any further, can I get some clarification? Monmouthshire Housing was mentioned there.
Yes, I understand what you're asking, Councillor Evans. I believe Rob will be able to give you an answer.
Yes, certainly, Chairman. I don't think you need to declare even a personal interest here, Councillor Evans. But that's that's up to you. If the members of Monmouthshire Housing Association wanted to declare personal interest, then they could do. But my advice is that they don't need to. And certainly, if you did declare personal interest, it wouldn't be a prejudicial interest, I would suggest. Monmouthshire Housing and not the applicant here. So, yeah, as I say, I don't think you need to declare personal interest on this one, being a member of Monmouthshire Housing Association.
Thank you for that clarification, Rob. We now have Mr. Paul Thomas. Is it the applicant who wishes to speak? You also have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The principle of the development has already been established by virtue of outline planning consent. The proposed dwelling will be built in a sympathetic way to fit in with the vicinity and enhance the surrounding area to help meet the new houses in Abergavenny. The application does not contravene any planning policies. Reply to neighbours' objection based on loss of privacy. I would say that the dwellings are located sufficient distance from the neighbours' houses so do not contravene planning policy in any respect or loss of privacy to first floor windows. Will be obscure as habitable rooms will be facing the footpath. There are no objections from the highways and an application is supported by the planning officer. I would ask you to grant the permission which is subject to my application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr Thomas. Local member, as we say, is not on the planning committee, so the neighbouring one, I believe, is Councillor Harris. If you want to speak first, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we just absolutely clear up that Monmouthshire Housing have nothing to do with this development, apart from the fact, if we can go back to that slide, they own the car park to the right and in front of that electricity substation. And could the officers actually clarify that there is entrance to garages on the left? That's it, where the chairman has just pointed out.
Chair, my understanding is they only the bit by the garages and the parking court. They're not the applicant. They aren't benefiting from the application anyway. Thank you. It's just important to get that cleared up.
Just to clarify as well, Chairman, if I may. Sure. On this point, the planning officers answered the question in effect in paragraph 5.4.2 of the report. This really is a private legal matter, if it is indeed a matter, and I don't know whether it is or not, between the applicant and Monmouthshire Housing. So if there is any consent required, then the applicant must obtain that from Monmouthshire Housing. But that doesn't preclude you this afternoon considering the application.
Thank you, Chair. It only brought it up because it was actually brought up by the objector. Do we, before I carry on, have any indication of what Abergavenny Town Council said? There's nothing in the report.
No, Chair, we haven't had a reply from them.
No. Okay, thank you, Chair. As has already been mentioned, there is outline planning permission on this site, and from looking through the report, I honestly cannot see any planning objections that would interfere with the decision I make. But I'd rather listen to what other members say before, if it's up to me to recommend or not. I will come back later if I may, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Ralph Chapman wish to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've known this area for the best part of 50 years. And above that lane there is a large housing site of several hundred houses. Every day, people are using that lane, school children, people going to work, people going shopping. And I can't see anywhere on there where there can be put a separate footpath to separate these pedestrians from the cars using this development. And that really does concern me because, you know, as I say, I've known this area, and I would say there's probably hundreds of people using this lane every day. And I just can't accept the safety aspect of that entrance for the pedestrians that use that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Paul Murphy. Sorry. Yeah, at least it seems everybody's awake that's in the room. Thank you.
I wish I had his salary. Picking up on Councillor Chapman's point, that's a particularly good slide there. Vehicles already use that lane. They use the garages at that lane. This application requires the removal of that tree on the corner and the permanent reduction in the height of that hedge. So in actual fact, those measures will make this site safer for pedestrians, in my view, than it currently is. And just how many vehicle movements per day can be generated by properties. It really isn't very much. There's always a perception when people are looking at these applications of thinking it's going to turn it into something that it never turns out to be. I'm also a little bit puzzled, and perhaps I've missed something, but I couldn't work out in my mind. Perhaps somebody can correct me. I don't see how this site can be accessed off Park Crescent by construction vehicles. I didn't get that one at all. Have I missed something?
Chair, if I can just cover that one. The land outlined in blue on that plan was a previous application, I think, considered by committee. It was a detached bungalow, and consent was given to become a pair of semis. And to the left-hand side is an access drive. So I think the residents are concerned that could become either a construction or a permanent access. If members are concerned about that, Chair, we can add an extra condition saying that the access to the new development can only be from the north, and there shall be no access through the site to the south.
Thank you, Mark.
That would certainly cover that one, I think. Other than that, Chair, there are an awful lot of houses in this area. This is, in my opinion, a suitable site. I do think that it will make it safer rather than the perception. So I would be happy to recommend approval.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I did notice when we walked up there yesterday, it is like an alleyway, so to speak. I don't think you get big vehicles up there anyway if you were trying to. And yes, as cars are coming out from that entrance where the garages are already built, they will have more visibility to see people walking up and down coming from the left from Park Crescent anyway, so I would think that would be safer for them. Anyway, anybody else wish now to comment on this application? Councillor Doug Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Because I couldn't come to the site visit yesterday, I actually spent quite some time in the area on Sunday afternoon, and I'm always surprised that people want to sort of build in their back gardens, I must admit. But I don't see that we've got any argument here, because we've already, I don't think I was at the original meeting where the outline planning commission was given, so I don't think there's any reason that we can turn this down today. So I think, like Roger, as one of the local members in Abergavenny, I'm going to have to support this, that it goes forward.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's all been said. If we again go back to that slide showing the substation, etc., and it's been mentioned. Sorry, Jim. It's been mentioned that there are hundreds of people coming up and down that alleyway, and that is certainly true. I live up a single track lane, and I'm fully aware that if I come barging out into my lane and go hurtling down it, I could cause an awful lot of damage. And anyone that buys those houses, assuming we give approval, will be acutely aware that when they come out of their drive, or in fact when they're going down that road, they're going to have to be very careful. And obviously the same thing applies to anyone that has to cross the pavement to get onto their drive. They could run anyone over at any time. So, you know, that's not a good enough reason, I think, to dismiss this application. And I think Mark's already mentioned it would be good that we can condition that this is the only access point on the for the development, and as such, I'm willing to second Phil Murphy's approval.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor Harris. So it has been moved and seconded by Councillor Harris for approval. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
That's 14 for the application.
Those against the application?
And there's one against, therefore the application is approved.
All right, thank you very much, Rob. We now go to page 9, and this is in Chepstow 00349. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks a change of use of the ground floor of the Bridge Inn Chepstow to retail use and a cafe, the use of the first floor as a flat, and the creation of a pair of duplex apartments in the car park. The second floor of the building will be retained as a one-bedroom flat. The Bridge Inn is a Grade 2 listed building. It's a 3-storey end of terrace with both 2-storey and single-storey additions. It's located within Chepstow Town Centre at the junction of Bridge Street and the back. So if we can move through the photographs, Mark, please. That's the rear of the property, and that's the outbuilding that's going to be demolished. And that is the car park at the rear, the siting of the proposed duplex apartments. There's no significant alterations to the appearance of the public house. However, a large outbuilding that we can see on the photograph is to be demolished as part of the proposals. The site lies within the flood zone C1, therefore the proposed new units do not have ground floor accommodation, and all living space is on the upper floors. The proposed apartments, if we can go to the proposed, that's the elevations, there they are. They are to be finished in timber, stone and brick with a metal standing seam roof, and designed with a contemporary design as a modern interpretation of warehouse structures which would have been prevalent alongside the river. The site lies within Chepstow Town development boundary, where residential development is acceptable subject to detailed planning considerations. The Council's Heritage Officer comments that the new apartments would be set away from the Bridge Inn, and the use of secondary natural materials means that the inn would remain the dominant feature on the site. The contemporary design adds interest to this part of the Y corridor and would form part of a cluster of properties of different styles, ages, designs, and would enhance the overall character and appearance of this part of the conservation area. It's acknowledged that the apartments are large, but the mass is comparable to some of the nearby properties and not considered in direct competition with the listed building itself, and therefore preserves the character and appearance and setting of the listed building. With regard to neighbour amenity, the separation distance between the proposed units and the existing properties is more than 21 metres, and due to their orientation, are unlikely to have an adverse impact due to overlooking or loss of light, and there's no highway objection. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application, subject to the conditions outlined in the report, and also a condition proposed by the Council's Biodiversity Officer provided in late correspondence.
Thank you very much for that, Paula. The local member, Councillor Peter Farley, is not a member of the committee, the planning committee, but he wishes to comment on this application. You have 6 minutes, Councillor, and 2 minutes to sum up if you so wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. As you know, I rarely trouble the committee with my observations, and only do so when I have some concerns. And the concerns that I want to raise have been communicated to me in various ways. So I'll set out briefly what those are, then make a request to the committee, and then conclude by picking up on a particular issue which has come to me from a resident and is echoed by others and by my own observations. The first thing to say is that I have not had any correspondence or communication on this matter as a town councillor. I'm also a town councillor for the ward, so my comments are only as the county councillor for St Mary's Ward. However, I have had a communication from one of my fellow town councillors for the ward who points out that there have been a number of objections to this application, or concerns have been voiced, not least by the town council itself. And he asks me to note those, and says that he doesn't think that the proposal is really in keeping with the area and will cause real inconvenience to residents local to the development. We'll come back to that a bit later. The second point I'd like to make to the committee is simply to urge you to take very seriously the views that have been put by local residents and by the Town Council. The Town Council is opposed to this. I just ask you to give due consideration to what they have said. Now I come to another item of correspondence, which I will actually read to you. It is from a resident, a Mr. Jex at 24A Bridge Street, who apparently only discovered, or says he only discovered what was going on yesterday when the site visit took place. And I don't know whether he actually spoke to people during the site visit. I was unable to be there myself for other reasons, but he did contact me immediately afterwards. And so I have said that as he's unable to register to speak here today, that I will bring to you some of the points that he's made. Mr. Jex, remember, lives very close to this development. My objection to the plans are that the properties proposed will look completely out of character and size for the small plot and location, and will completely block the light and view of the riverbank from his property. There are already 600 plus new homes being built at the bottom of Chepstow. Is there any need for more houses to be built? This is what he says. However, he also echoes what other residents have said. They have no objection to the pub itself being turned into the cafe and retail facility. And that brings me to his final points, which also echo my concerns. And if I might read them and then take you to the paper that you have in front of you for the meeting. I have concerns regarding parking. There is already limited parking for residents and tourists on the riverbank, and as the pub car park is to be developed, the situation will become even worse. He goes on to say he believes the development of the car park will be detrimental to future plans for the pub, as he doesn't think an antique shop and coffee shop at the bottom of the town is sustainable, as it would be compromised due to lack of parking. Now, that's his view, and I said I would represent his view to you. But I would ask you to look at the report from the highways. I'm not sure I completely understand what they're saying. They seem to be saying there should be so many parking spaces. Actually, there's nowhere near that, and it doesn't really matter. Well, I wonder about that. If you had a map in front, I don't think have we got any photographs of the road alongside the entrance to the existing car park, or a plan that would show that? If you haven't, I can do without. No? Okay. That is the view of the property from the road that then goes, if you are heading to your left, as it were, you'll be going over the old Y Bridge. So to access the new development and the riverbank, you take a turn immediately after that bit of the building that you can see, and you turn along towards the riverbank into what is, in fact, is a relatively narrow and short cul-de-sac, which ends with the open ground on the riverbank by the bandstand. The pointed issue here, I think, is there's already considerable parking there due to normal visits to the riverbank. You may not have seen that yesterday. It's October, not the height of the season. There is already sometimes very restricted room for people to safely manoeuvre. Remember, you've got to go in there, hopefully turn, but cars will park all along there, and then to get out again. So I think the main objection to the traffic assessment is it doesn't seem to me to take full account of the complete context. If there is a retail centre, facility, if there is a cafe, if there is parking for the residents, which is already acknowledged on the new development, plus the use that is already made of that bit of land for various parking purposes, I would suggest to you that there are likely to be some serious consequences, and at the very least, the Highways assessment needs to be reconsidered. Highways end their comments at the end of 4.1.7. In light of the aforementioned comments, there are no highway grounds to sustain an objection, subject to the existing level of parking being maintained in perpetuity. Not quite sure what that means. In summary, there are objections which people have made, which are recorded, they are in the papers. I would ask you simply to consider them seriously. There is a considered objection by the Town Council, but there is this particular, I think, insufficiently examined point about the impact from the parking and traffic point of view in a narrow
Excuse me,
small
Councillor, you have had your time.
area,
Thank
which is at the heart of destination Chepstow as a tourist area. Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence.
you. Thank you, Councillor Farley. You can, if you so wish, after the discussion, come back and make 2 minutes more to sum up. Well, I must comment that that was brilliant on behalf of our high-tech. I do applaud you. It's far better than what I would ever have done, believe me, in a month of Sundays. Most members were there at the site visit yesterday, so I will invite comments now, please. Mark wishes to come back first.
Sorry, Chair, only very briefly, just to reassure planning committee members in the consultation. The application's been with us for a while, so I've actually consulted twice on 2 different schemes, and we checked, and we definitely consulted ward member and the gentleman round the back. And there would have been press notice and site notices as well, being the conservation area in the listed building. So just to reassure you, we have dotted the I's and crossed the T's on that.
Thank you very much for that comment. It gives clarification rather than for people to think that things are going on and people haven't been consulted or had the opportunity to comment. Councillor Hayward, do you wish to comment first, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's a difficult application. I'm not against development in the area, but I think the form of this development is really not suitable for the area. I think the appearance of the buildings, the materials the buildings are built out of, the form of the buildings, the size of the buildings is not in keeping with the character. But I also note that it is in the conservation area, and conservation areas are one of the few places where the view is protected. And the view into a conservation area and out of a conservation area is a planning consideration, whereas we know on normal considerations it's not. And here, I think there is no doubt whatsoever that it will spoil the view for some of the housing behind, but more importantly, it'll spoil the view for the people on the riverbank. At the moment, they're looking across an open space into some old established, some are quite tall buildings, but they're looking into the heart of an old part of Chepstow. And I think 2 modern buildings blocking that view off absolutely upsets the character of the conservation area, and it completely takes away the character of the area along the riverbank. I also note the concerns about the parking. It was one that I mentioned there before. Whether it's a pub or whether it's a restaurant, whether it's if it's a commercial building, you need parking. People don't walk anywhere nowadays. They'll come and they'll generally park. And we all know that once you lose parking space, you never get it back. I've never known of one instance of people pulling buildings down to make a car park. But we have plenty of instances of people filling in open spaces to put up buildings. And because of that, I am against this thing, and I would move that we don't approve it, that we refuse this application because of the position in the conservation area and the form of the buildings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dovey, I'm sorry, but you're a Chepstow member. Did you wish to comment on this?
Well, only if everybody else has finished, Madam Chairman. I have very strong views about the nature of any development that's done here. It's perhaps worth just thinking about the location. It's the start of the coastal walk. There's a Roman crossing. You can see where the bridge was when the Romans were here. So it's got some history, if you like. It's the site of an ancient docks. It has a unique bridge, and people stand on that bridge and take pictures of the cliffs and the whole area there. It is viewed as a potential heritage site, a national heritage site, because of the whole history in the area. So the whole thing is very highly historic, and it really does need sympathy. Having said that, I'm not totally against there being a development of some dwellings in there, and I'm not totally against them being, if you like, showing historic nudges to the past, if you like, some in materials, etc., and ticks in the design, because there are a lot of things that you can pick up in that area. And I'm afraid the buildings that are proposed here don't do any of that. Councillor Hayward mentioned the materials. Forget if you ignore the design, the proposed materials, etc., they would be totally out of sympathy with the area. There are issues in terms of parking. What nobody has mentioned is that isn't just parking in there. There is an oxbow at the top. Where it's a turning area. So I know people do park in there, but it does cause chaos. Now, if you put a cafe there as well, it would make it even more difficult. But having said that, there is parking out by the castle, so I wouldn't be against the cafe. But I am totally against the nature and design of the buildings to go in that back parking space. We should be able to do better than we've got here.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey.
Somebody needs to sharpen their pencil and think a bit about the heritage of the
Thank you. Councillor Harris, then Councillor Blakeborough. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's reasonably well known that I'm not averse to modern buildings. After all, we are in the 21st century, and we need to have that represented. So I'm usually a champion of modern buildings, but in this case, I don't know if we can go back and look at the plans, but you could, while we're doing that, you can see that absolutely beautiful, unique bridge. And as you're coming over that bridge from England into Wales, you will be able to look straight into that site, especially in the winter when the leaves are off the trees. And I do not think it doesn't look as if you will be able to from there, as I say, especially when the leaves aren't on the trees. And I seriously don't believe the plans of the buildings that we're going to put up there in any way are good enough for the site. I'm not averse to the site being developed necessarily, but I would much rather see something much more appropriate there. If you like, enhancing the fact that there's that beautiful bridge there and a listed building that's now not got its original use. So I'm not sure whether or not refusing is the best idea, or whether or not deferring to ask the applicants to have a radical rethink on the design of the two buildings proposed to put there.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Blakeborough.
Yeah, going on from Councillor Harris, really, it seems that the main issue is the design, and that Town Council and local residents and also local members have all said that the design is not in keeping with the area. But in the report, we also read that Monmouthshire County Council Conservation Team, and their job is to ensure that the area is protected and they have all the skills and the knowledge. And they're suggesting that the apartments would be set away from the inn, and actually as you're going across the bridge you can't see them from that point, and that the inn would remain the dominant feature. So when we're looking at design, it's so subjective, isn't it? I guess I would be going along the lines of Councillor Harris, because the other elements we agree with, but perhaps to go back, defer it for the size and the design to be re-looked at again.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Councillor Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and Debbie and Roger have said more or less what I was going to say. Like Roger, I'm not against modern design at all, and I do take the point that this is designed to look like warehouses. If they were further along towards the boat, where there's more of a condensed load of buildings, and it was in amongst that lot, it would look entirely appropriate, I think. I am concerned about the fact that this is conspicuous. I do understand that you can't actually see it really from crossing the bridge, but anybody who's walking around there certainly would, and it would, I think, detract from the pub. I don't like seeing empty pubs that end up going derelict. I'd be quite happy to see the rest of the development go ahead there. But as regards the design of those two properties, I am worried about that design in that particular location, although in a slightly more dense location, I don't think I'd have the same worries about it. So I think I would like the applicant to think again about the design of those buildings in that particular location. But the rest of it, I would be quite happy to see go ahead.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Higginson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, for my part, it's totally out of context of what is in that area. That's the view I take, and I leave it at that. But the other thing is, it is on the floodplain. But I've seen water halfway up the street up there in years gone by, and I haven't lived in the area, in the Calicut area for that long.
Thank you very much, Councillor Higginson. Now, it's been suggested as a deferment for the applicants to liaise with their officers about the design, not of all of it, but everybody seems to be happy with part of the application. It's just the designs of the two new builds in the car park. So, Councillor Hayward, sorry?
Chair, I actually moved refusal before the suggestion was put.
Right, thank you. So, do you have a seconder for your refusal? Sorry? No.
Chair, I was just going to come in and comment on a couple of things, but do you want to finish that bit first, see if there's a seconder? But if I could chip in before there's a vote, if that's all right, please.
Right, thank you. Right, I think it's because Councillor Hayward is sat further back than I did get to see you up there and your suggestion. So it's been recommended for approval by the officers. So we've got a couple of dilemmas here for going against that as it is, as we're looking at it. So did Mark want to put his suggestions first?
Chair, I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. There was some conversation around parking, but the answer to that is in paragraph 5.5.1 of the report. So in a nutshell, it is short against our standards, but the proposed uses, including the residential and the cafe and the retail, needs fewer spaces than the pub. So it is actually a betterment. I can understand why that's a bit of a weird argument to come up with. But in terms of the numbers, the number of spaces currently needed is greater than what would be needed with this development. Hence, highways have got no objection. But it's worth separating out those two issues, because if members are concerned about that and think that's a reason for refusal, then any development on that site's dead in the water in terms of, bad pun, in terms of extra units. My advice to you would be not to go down that route. So I don't think we could sustain that on appeal. The design argument, I can sense there's a groundswell of concern. My only comments would be, I have seen this kind of very modern design successfully in a heritage context, and it's worked really, really well. I think the risk is if we try and negotiate, if you try and imagine that rendered with a slate roof, I think it's just going to look a bit bonkers. It either needs to be unashamedly modern or not be there at all. I would go with unashamedly modern. I sense some of you at least would think the opposite. So it is an option to defer and negotiate on design. I'm not convinced we'll get something back that's better or that works. I think the solution that works, in my opinion, is a very, very contemporary design. So I just put that out there for you. As you're aware, those are the options: so approval, refusal, or defer for those negotiations. But that's my thoughts on the matter for what they're worth.
Chairman, also, if before you take a vote, Councillor Farley will have 2 minutes. But furthermore than that, there is also a habitats assessment within the papers. So just make sure that you've all read that, please.
Thank you for that, Rob. Do you wish now to sum up?
Very briefly.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I came to ask the committee to give thorough consideration to a number of points, and I believe that has been done. I've got nothing more to add to what I said before beyond 2 things. Thanking the officers for their very agile production of the street view map, which has actually underlined the very point I made. I didn't make a point about the number of spaces for parking on the site. I said I thought that the highways assessment had not been sufficiently in the round. The problem area is actually the very bit of a roadway along part of the riverbank that you showed me. And I would ask the committee to consider, if it is minded to defer, that it asks for a more rounded assessment from highways. It's actually not good enough just to say there's car parks nearby. People will need to collect and take goods from the retail, particularly if it's an antique place. So these things need to be a little bit more carefully worked out, but I thank the committee for their consideration.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Farley. Quickly, Councillor Dovey.
I did say I wasn't against modern, and what Mark has said is very often unashamedly modern will go very, very well in some historic places. And of course you leave a legacy if you do it well. And that site is all about legacy. That whole area is all about legacy. So if we're going to put something there, it has to be have a legacy about it, and a good one. If it's good to be done, unashamedly modern, fine, but make sure it's done right. You can pick up various cues with the materials and things that you use. I wouldn't want to see something there that's a pastiche, if you like.
I think we've discussed this.
I just wanted to be clear about that.
That's fine, Councillor Dovey. Councillor Chapman, if you are quick, please, because we have, I think, laboured over this long enough.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to second Bob Haywood's proposal for refusal, because I think any development there is not going to help any parking problems in the future. So I will second Bob Haywood.
It's been moved and seconded for refusal. Could I have a show of hands for refusal, please? Those for approval? Yes, yes, against refusal then. Yes, yes. Thank you, Councillor Dovey. There is also been suggested that it be deferred. So could I have a show of hands for deferral, please?
So that's 11 for to defer the application.
Right.
Chair, just to clarify the reasons for deferral then, is the design and the parking? Just design. Okay.
Thank you all very much for that, and that will come back again. We now go to page 21, application 00938, Inland Baddock. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to a replacement dwelling and garage at Orchard House, Llanbaddock. This application was presented to Planning Committee on the 6th of September with a recommendation for approval. Members did not agree with this recommendation, and the application was deferred to be refused on the grounds of scale, design and highway safety. In response to these concerns, the applicant has submitted further drawings of the existing and proposed access to demonstrate an improvement in highway safety. So if you could put those up, please, Mark, the first one. Shows the access improvements. That one, thank you. That slide there shows the existing access, which shows that it has visibility of 12.4 metres to the right, 11.6 metres to the left. And the next slide shows the proposed access, showing the improved visibility there, which is 2.4 times 60 visibility to the right and 2.4 times 28 metres visibility to the left. We've also got highways officers' comments who have provided the following. The existing access is seriously below the current standards and is deemed unsafe. The proposed access offers an improved access both in terms of actual dimensions as well as substantially improved visibility to the site. Therefore, the Highway Authority supports the proposal and the new access as it improves highway safety for the site users and users of the public highway. The applicant has also provided visualizations of the proposed new dwelling in relation to the existing to show the resultant building in the landscape. So if we could show those, please, Mark. No, don't put this way. That one, yeah. This overlay shows that the height of the proposed dwelling will be the same as the eaves height of the existing house and will therefore be lower in the landscape than the existing. I don't know whether members can see the superimposed. You can see the roof of the existing behind the superimposed new dwelling. So it shows, I think members were concerned about the size of it last time due to the slide that we showed. So the applicant has submitted these to show, what it actually will look like in the landscape. If members are still minded to refuse the application, the reasons are provided in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe the local member wishes to comment as she's present today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, this is the first time I've ever been the only speaker to speak on an issue which, I say the only speaker, that I didn't realise our rules and regs regarding representations from objectors, so thank you. I'd like to clarify to members of the public, and I know there are a number, well, yes, I see a good representation of local individuals. Clarify to members of the public that I personally take no part in decision-making at either the delegated or this meeting. I make my representations and I listen, hopefully, and consider my opinions before I give them. The decisions are actually made by my colleagues here of the Planning Committee or officers. So my contribution is my considered opinion. As the local member, I will, as I agreed with the local folks, make representations on their views. I'm well aware of them, and I thank them for their hospitality as well. The residents consider that the minutes do not fully reflect the previous meeting. They continue concerned with the siting of the proposal. They consider the design is inappropriate, unacceptable, and they consider the proposed access dangerous. My concern with safety with the highways continues. I think the new access, really scrutinised by the highways officers, is acceptable. They've reviewed their calculations. I've just looked at those plans again. I've looked at the plans on my computer. I feel that this is now an acceptable access to the site. Regarding the design has been negotiated between Monmouthshire's planning officers and the applicants and their agent. And my personal opinion, the design is both innovative and environmentally sound. So the decision is to be made by my colleagues. It is an innovative design. It is very different. I accept the public have different opinions. respect my view as well, please, folks. I don't make decisions lightly on anything as an elected member. I think they're not always going to coincide with what the residents feel is appropriate. So my colleagues on the Planning Committee will now make the decisions on an application that now has a much more satisfactory access, which our professional highways engineers have truly scrutinised, and I've made sure of that. The design, planning is always very subjective. So I thank you members for your time and hearing.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. You will also later have 2 minutes if you so wish to sum up. Right, thank you. Next local member on the committee, anybody? I don't think so, but you're all well aware of this application. Councillor Blakeborough, then Councillor Murphy. Thank you.
Yes, I remember this application from last time. As members, I think we've got to be very careful when we ask applicants to go away and do something, they come back and they do it. We have to take that on board. We ask the applicants to review and take into account the safety issues and the size and scale of the property, which they have done. They've come back, they've improved the access, and they actually have reduced the size. We're looking at design again. We've said before, design is subjective. I actually don't mind it. I think it is innovative. I like the use of the stone and the wood. I would accept this for it to go through, to recommend it.
Thank you. Support it, you mean. Thank you, Councillor Blakeborough. Mark wishes to comment now. Thank you.
Sorry, obviously I welcome that support, but I just wanted to clarify one thing. The scale and the size of the property hasn't actually changed. What they've done for us is provide some different images to show it in its context. Because we were very conscious after the last meeting, we had some fairly small images in black and white, and then we showed you that. And I don't think our presentation helped much because it appears very prominent. The way in which it actually sits in the site, and that's how it will look, it is set down compared to the existing property, which is what that one says. So I don't want anyone to be misled. The size of the property hasn't changed from last time. We're just presenting some better information on how it would actually sit in the street scene.
Thank you for that, Mark. Councillor Murphy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Picking up on Councillor Blakeborough's points, really. I had two concerns last time. One was I thought, can you go to the access, please, Paula? Or Mark, whichever one of you. Yeah, that'll do. I was concerned that when we actually stood on site, whereas the proposed access was infinitely better than the existing one, which is dangerous, it can't be described as anything else, that if it went further to the left on that plan, it appeared being stood on the side of the road, that it would be better again. But Highways colleagues, as Val has said, have looked at this very hard. They're quite satisfied with it. I'm happy that they've looked at it again. I was also concerned about scale. I did suggest that perhaps it could be stretched, if you like, or to bring the height down. Now I've seen it in context of the existing building. I accept that it is actually smaller than I'd envisaged it, although I do accept that it hasn't actually been reduced in height. So I'm quite happy to second approval.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Harris, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, previously I was really concerned with the access, and from what I've heard today, you know, I'm now convinced that that is the best possible access that could be there, and obviously it's a darn sight safer than the existing one. But can we go back and look at the actual picture of the existing building? Close up, there was a close up. That, yeah. And it's interesting that some of the objections are that this new building is totally out of character with what's around. If that's not totally out of character with anything else in the area, then I'm not on this planet. There's no doubt about that. That is a huge building. It's relatively modern, and the one that's going to replace it, if we say yes, is much smaller than that, although obviously of an entirely different design. I've got no hesitation in agreeing with other members who say they're happy to approve this.
Thank you, Councillor Harris.
Sorry,
Councillor
Chair.
Sorry.
It's the new dwelling's not smaller; it's quite a lot bigger. Did you mean lower?
I'm talking about the massing as you're looking at it.
Okay.
Montage that the massing as you're looking at it is not as it's what you see on Blu-ray.
But it is considerably larger in footprint than what is there at present.
Yeah, footprint and volume is much bigger. Yeah.
Can you state exactly to members what it is?
Volume is 57, is it? It's 57% bigger in terms of volume.
Right, thank you very much. I'll have Councillor Hayward, then Councillor Strong, Councillor Ralph Chapman, and then Councillor Dovey. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I disagree with the man from Mars. He's not on this planet. When we looked at this application at the last meeting, we had concerns about road safety, but we also had concerns about the size and form of the building. What is there at the moment is a traditional build. It's a double-fronted, bay-windowed style of house, which was very common in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It stood the test of time. I am not against modern buildings, but the modern buildings must be in their context. And here we have a very big plot. The plot is capable of taking a large building. There's a large building on the site at the moment. It is probably capable of taking a building bigger than the one that's there at present, but not a building of the shape and form that is proposed. And I think that putting a very large building like that on that plot will actually alter the character of the whole area. And in this instance, it is completely out of character and will spoil the street scene. Even though it is a rural street scene, it will actually spoil the area. And I am against this application on the size and the form and the shape of the building that's proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Hayward. I drive past there 3 or 4 times a week, and for Councillor Harris to say there are no other properties similar to it is quite ridiculous. It's, as we said last time, it's much bigger than the existing property. The scale and design are not in keeping or character, and I shall be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Councillor Ralph Chapman, I believe, next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I go along with what's just been said about this building. I know that there are places where modern buildings can sit in quite nicely, but in this area, it's just sticks out like a sore thumb. I can't support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey, then Councillor Maureen Powell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I had concerns about the access and visibility with regard to this building, and if the officers are convinced, as they appear they are, having looked at it twice, who am I to gainsay that they're wrong? So I will accept what they have chosen to say. With regard to the building, as somebody said something about it being the previous building and not being very good looking either. That is no reason why you should put something up that doesn't try to improve upon it. I think that this, as Councillor Hayward, no, I'd rephrase what I'm going to say. I believe that Councillor Hayward has said everything that I would wish to say, and I will be voting against this.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. Councillor Maureen Powell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've listened to everything that's been said this afternoon. The thing that I find most difficult is if that was a building that was falling down, was in need of great repair, I could accept somebody knocking it down and building something else there. But I find it very hard to knock down what is a perfectly good house and build something which I'm afraid I feel is not in keeping with the area. So I'm afraid I should be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Anybody else wish to comment now? Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I'm deeply shocked, Madam Chair, that our members here seem to be in the 19th century, not in the 21st century. I quite well remember going with you all on to a house built on the edge of the forest, somewhere in Monmouthshire, modern. It was, I think, awarded the prize as the best designed house of the year, and it does seem to me that we're going down these routes. A couple of days ago on TV, it showed a house, a new development, a single house being built in the Forest of Dean. Quite frankly, magnificent. You know, and once again, it was treated as something exceptional. And I think you've got something exceptional here. And I'm disappointed with some of the attitudes of my members here today. You know, so you're taking down what is, you say the 1950s, it looks a lot more like the 1930s, quite frankly. But I'm fully in favour of the development here. I think it will be magnificent, and the setting itself, as you see there, I think we would be remiss not to pass it.
Thank you. I wish for someone to move now. I believe, Councillor Hayward, you moved refusal. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Brian Strong, for refusal? Because I have show of hands, please, for refusal. Thank you, Rob. And those for approval, please. Thank you very much, Rob.
Chair, that's just on design grounds.
Yes.
Chair, that's on design grounds alone. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Mark, for clarifying that. Right, that is the end of the application for today, but we have other items on the agenda. So I'll give 5 minutes if those wish to wait for the public all to clear. Right, thank you very much indeed. We now have Jim Keach, who's going to give a presentation now to the committee. If you'd like to stand there, please, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, members. Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Okay, thanks. I try not to take up too much of your time. The purpose of this report is that to recommend to the Planning Committee that they confirm tree preservation order number MCC 264 situated at a house called Kai Elga in Highfield Road, Osbaston, and that they confirm it without modification. I'm sure you've all had a copy of the report and looked through it. The gist of the report is as follows. My colleague Craig O'Connor, the planning officer, noted that there was a mature Wellingtonia tree during a pre-application site visit to Kai Elga on the 11th of March this year. He felt that the tree merited retention and discussed the matter with me on his return. Subsequently, a tree preservation order was prepared and issued on the 12th of April 2016. One letter of objection to the order was received and is shown in the report as item 1. The objections in the letter dated the 3rd of May 2016, and my response in my letter dated the 12th of May 2016 were basically along the lines that the tree, taking them through individually, the tree is not a maiden, and for those of you who are wondering what a maiden is, it's a term that applies to veteran trees. They're split into 3 categories. There are maidens, coppices and pollards. A coppice is a tree that grows from the stump on the ground. A pollard is a tree that has had the crown taken off and still has a trunk. And a maiden is a veteran tree that has had no maintenance and is grown as a straight, what one would call a normal tree. That is immaterial to the tree preservation order. It doesn't have to be in any of those categories at all. There were also questions over health and safety, and there were subsidence issues to an adjacent property, which to date have been unsubstantiated. I gave the objectors my undertaking that I would take the matter to the committee at the latest I could, and it was intended to be September this year, but time constraints prevented me from doing so. But I felt that I gave them enough time to prepare reports, etc., to support their objections. They also questioned the amenity value of the tree and why the tree was not protected when there was an adjacent development built some 25, 30 years ago. Unfortunately, Monmouthshire County Council cannot answer for the decisions or lack of them by the previous local planning authority. A further objection letter dated the 22nd of May 2016 and shown as item 3 in the report, and my response dated the 1st of June 2016 showed that the objections were of a similar nature to the previous ones, but also contained reference that the tree was not raised with Craig during the pre-application meeting back in March. However, this claim contradicts the written evidence in Craig O'Connor's report, where he does make reference to the tree, its importance in the landscape, and the need for the applicants to engage an arboricultural consultant to advise the extent of the development which could accommodate the tree. This advice is shown in the italicised paragraph of my response at item 4. Finally, this isn't in the report itself, but this is an addendum to it. I notified the objectors, Mr. and Mrs. Woodward, on the 1st of September this year via email, to tell them that, as I mentioned earlier, it was my intention to place this matter before the committee in September. I now couldn't get it to committee until today, so that gave them a further 5 weeks for them to submit evidence to support their objections. Evidence, as I've said, which hitherto have been unforthcoming. So, Madam Chairman, my recommendation is therefore that the committee confirm this tree preservation order without modification, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jim. I dare say the local member wishes to speak on this. Councillor Hayward?
Yes, Chair, thank you for the thing. Everybody knows my ward here, and everybody knows that trees are an important feature of the ward. And there are many instances of mature trees which enhance the ward. And I think that all mature trees in Osbaston are worthy of a tree preservation order. Obviously, as trees get old and sometimes they deteriorate, and sometimes they have to be cut down for safety reasons, but I don't think this is the case here, so I would support the tree preservation order being put in place.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hayward. Anybody else wish to comment? Monmouth, Councillor Wentwell, please.
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm in a bit of a quandary here. We've had tree preservation orders put on trees, and it depends on the size of who's developing. If it's a single developer or a single sort of plot or whatever, they can't do anything. But a big developer can remove trees in a tree preservation order. Has been placed on those trees already. So, well, can I have some clarification, please, on this little subject?
Can you wish to comment, Jim? Sometimes they
yes,
have to put
I
them
have
somewhere
spoken
else.
to Councillor Winkle about this previously, and I believe, Madam Chairman, that this is a point of order, that this is not an agenda item, and I'm quite happy to share that with him again. He's referring to Wanstow Road, where they're intending on putting over 300 houses, and inevitably, yes, we did put a tree preservation order on to retain as many trees as we could, but as the old adage says, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, and very sadly, some of the trees had to go. I'm not saying that this tree will stay if a development comes in that is acceptable to the local planning authority, which means the tree may have to be removed to facilitate that development, then the tree will go. Simple as that.
But isn't it sometimes then encouraged that they can put another tree of the liking
They
or something
can, yes,
somewhere
yeah,
else?
yeah. The whole purpose of the tree preservation order, Madam Chairman, was in response to a pre-application inquiry. We identified that there was a specific tree on the site which had great landscape value, and that was just to protect it while the planning issues are gone through over the next weeks and months. Otherwise, they could just go in there and cut it down, and if it were true that there were health and safety issues and subsidence issues with the adjacent property, I would question why this hasn't been raised before they even thought of developing the site.
Thank you for that explanation. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I find that explanation rather disturbing, Madam Chairman. If we put pre-preservation orders on trees, then we should protect those trees. I've known in the past where developers have built property and they've gone to some so-called tree expert and they say it's diseased, it's got to come down. We should be protecting these trees no matter what any developer says.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Can I
Rob?
be of assistance there, Chairman? In fairness to Councillor Chapman's point there, if a developer, if a member of the public, frankly, came to the council with a report from an arboreal expert to say, look, this tree is diseased, it needs to have some work done on it, well, that's the purpose of a TPO, frankly. The TPO preserves the tree. As Jim says, if the TPO, the provisional TPO, wasn't put on that tree could have been removed, and that would be the end of the matter. But because it's got some intrinsic landscape value, then it was felt, officers felt, that it should be protected with a provisional tree preservation order, and today, as Planning Committee, you're being asked to whether or not you wish to confirm that order. Just to back up what Jim says again, it doesn't prevent the developer, a person on whose land this tree sits, coming to the council and saying, look, we want to do some work, this is the nature of the work, are you content with that? If you like, it sort of encourages a discussion about the future of the tree. Without the order, that tree may have gone.
Thank you. Okay, do you all understand now what Rob has actually said? So it's there until another decision has been made.
I can understand, Madam Chairman.
But you don't like it? No. Hayward? Councillor Dovey, sorry.
If there are tree preservation orders in place on a piece of property that is going to be sold, are those tree preservation orders in the sales documents, so the person buying the land...
Yes, they are. They're picked up at the land search, yes,
Well,
that's right.
with that thought in mind, one is bound to think that perhaps Ralph has got a very good case. It's, you know, they're buying the land knowing what is there
Indeed,
already.
The tree preservation orders are shown up on the local land charges search. That's another function of a council of this type, a principal council. So we keep a register of the TPOs, and if a search comes in about someone who's interested in purchasing that property, and there's a TPO on there, that TPO will be revealed. And you're quite right, the purpose of it is to protect the tree. But if there are other circumstances that overtake that, for example, the tree becomes diseased, may fall on a property, may potentially harm someone, then we need to look at that again.
Madam Chairman, I think I suspected, if I didn't exactly know, that that was the case. What I wanted it was sort of spelled out here, so that, you know, people are aware that these orders are for the protection of the trees. And I think when developers come along and say, well, we bought it, we want it taken down, the tree should get really good protection. There should have to be some extraordinarily good reason why the developer didn't take note of what was there and was under our protection as far as we are as a county.
Sorry, Chairman, to labour this point, but again, I think it's an important point. If someone chops down a tree that's protected by a tree preservation order, that's a criminal offence. That carries a fine of up to £20,000. So it's a serious matter. Again, you know, I'm just giving you that by way of background. Quite passionate about trees, and I think the committee is as a whole in
Madam
fairness.
Chairman, if I could just clarify something as well. Councillor Wintle is quite right that they did remove some trees at the Wannerstow Road site, but for clarification, only one of those trees was covered by a tree preservation order. It wasn't a particularly brilliant specimen, according to the report that was made on it. The other 3 trees that were felled, one was dead, one was nearly dead, and the other one was, for want of a better word, falling to bits. So we have to put these things into context, that the County Council did place an extensive tree preservation order on that site some years ago, and we are sort of digressing slightly from the agenda here, I accept that. But most of those trees have been retained and incorporated into the design of Wannerstow Road.
Chair, sorry, I didn't want to extend the point, but just to say those decisions are made by us, officers or committee, depending on how the application is determined. So we'll explicitly set out if TPO trees are affected and look through a justification. So on David Dovey's point, Councillor Dovey's point, there are exceptional circumstances in terms of the trees going. You know, we don't just think that one's slightly inconvenient. There are circumstances. We joke about Jim chaining himself to the trees, but you know, we put up a good fight to ensure they only ever go if they have to. So yeah, the default position's for keeping the trees.
Thank you very much,
Chairman.
but I do believe when we have an application for any development that it will be highlighted on all of that to say whether there are TPOs, and we look at all applications individually and with all clarity, then decisions are made. Councillor Wintle, quickly please.
Yes, Madam Chair, just to correct Jim, there was 5 oak trees, one of which was dead, and I totally agree that should have come down. But the other 4, there was nothing wrong with those oak trees. The fact they were in the middle of the development, that's all that was wrong with them.
Yes. Thank you very much for that. We'll now move on. Are you all happy with the recommendation? Could we have show of hands, please?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Right.
The provisional tree preservation order is confirmed.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
We now go on to agenda 6. Thank you very much, Jim, for that. Thank you, Paula.
There's 2 appeal decisions to report, Chair. The first one was the inspector was Mr. Thickett, who you saw today earlier on. This was for a wind turbine at Mathen. and the appeal was dismissed on the basis of the impact upon the listed building. So that was a good result. And the second one, it's an enforcement issue. We served an enforcement notice on an unauthorised gate at Punchbowl View, which is a new development in Lanfoist. And the owner appealed on the basis that we didn't give enough time. And that appeal was dismissed and the enforcement notice is upheld. So she has to comply with the enforcement notice within 3 months. So that's the two appeal decisions.
Right, no more appeals received then?
We've had one appeal lodged about Monaholt Barn. I think Craig is a case officer. It's a written rep appeal. It's for the change of use of the converted barn to a small school at Mitchell Troy, members may recall. That was refused as a previous planning committee.
Do you want to give an update now, please, Craig, on that? No members here.
There is currently an application which is going to be viewed by the delegated panel to convert that building into a auxiliary care home in association with Hazeldene, which is a care home which was approved by this committee. So if that is approved, which the officer recommendation is to approve that scheme, then the current appeal will be withdrawn and they will carry on with the appeal for the school. So that's what the situation is at the moment.
Right, thank you very much for that. I do believe that Mark wishes to say something now when we're not live streaming, if you can still hold on for a couple of minutes afterwards. Otherwise, thank you all very much for your attendance today. Is the live streaming gone off yet, please, Richard? And also